All right.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura. Let's hop to the next slide and we'll dive right into CareerConnect. So just at a high level, we're going to touch on a few things of CareerConnect today. We're going to give you an overview on the program, talk about what industries we're going to be focused on, kind of eligibility criteria and allowable uses of the funds, an overview of the application process, and contact info should anyone have questions. We'll get much more into the support that our office is going to offer each and every one of you as eligible applicants. Next slide. So CareerConnect is broad. It's a broad program that OWS is rolling out. Right now, the focus is really to use this program to support the Governor's Workforce Council's strategic plan initiatives. This is really focused on sector training initiatives, which is one of the kind of key pillars of our strategic plan. And as per kind of Governor Lamont's strategy around workforce development, this initial launch of the first program of CareerConnect, we'll get into the subsequent programs, is very focused on getting people back to work as quickly as possible. We still have about 110, 115,000 people, seasonally adjusted, I should add, that are still out of work. So these funds are primarily focused on shorter term certificate programs. That's by no means the only focus, but that is the intent is for it to be more focused on kind of short term 6 to 12 week certificate programs that offer a industry recognized credential that get people back to work quickly. So just on the right hand side here, one of the kind of central features of our CareerConnect in general is a broader recruitment portal across the state. This is something that we are actively working on building, but we are thinking that this will act as sort of the one-stop shop for folks interested in job training. So this would be the repository where we would market this portal to unemployed individuals or individuals seeking to upskill or reskill. They would be routed to this portal. They would input their information, demographic information, skills that they have, careers that they want to get into, and we would help route them to specific available training opportunities based on their interests. So it's really this kind of, again, one-stop shop for individuals to get connected to the workforce system. And we're working closely with our workforce development boards and other stakeholders to make sure that this system is operationalized so that institutions of higher education can leverage it for recruiting into your programs in addition to your own recruitment methods. So this is really an enabling feature to make sure that recruitment is accelerated in Connecticut right now, because one of the things that our office has seen is that given the very strange labor market that we're in, that some individuals are just not being connected to the workforce system and aren't aware of opportunities that exist to them. So this is really central. This kind of idea of an intake portal is really central to this whole program. So we'll talk more about it later, but that's kind of one of the big focuses of this initial deployment. Next slide. So when I mentioned there's other programs within CareerConnect, kind of phase one is this ARPA deployment. So our office was issued $70 million, 62 of which are going to be available to institutions for grants. And this initial deployment, again, is going to be focused on shorter term certificate programs. So inclusive of that, what we are going to be asking applicants to consider when submitting an application is kind of the end-to-end services that need to be included to effectively deploy a workforce training or educational program. So what you see listed on the screen here are some of the features that we will be looking for in terms of a program design. So first and foremost, is the program aligned to an industry need right now? And we sort of have two ways that we've identified as means of flagging whether it's in demand. We'll talk more about this later, but our regional sector partnerships across the state are groups of employers, and if they have the opportunity to weigh in on a program and say, yes, this is aligned to the needs of manufacturing in Eastern Connecticut, then that is a great sign for us as we're reviewing applications, and that will be viewed very favorably. Also, we will look favorably upon applications that use labor market information to justify in-demand occupations and in-demand skills. So we're looking at multiple sources, but the main intent is for any kind of proposal that is submitted for the jobs that are included in that to be clearly aligned to an in-demand occupation by employers right now. A big focus, potentially the biggest focus of this grant, is to go towards historically underrepresented populations. We are really trying to push an equity lens on this program, given what we saw as the impacted populations of the pandemic. We know that marginalized communities were hit the hardest. And so this grant, given that it is ARPA money from the American Rescue Plan, we are really focused on making sure that it's going into the hands of workers from underserved communities. So we've put somewhat of a loose parameter on how we're defining underrepresented, but some areas that we're considering are, the BIPOC communities, individuals with disabilities, individuals who are reentering from incarceration, opportunity youth, veterans. And again, that's not exhaustive, but those are some populations that we would consider under that kind of underrepresented term. So anyway, so in addition, we are going to want to see pre-assessments included for any application. One of the things we saw firsthand in some of the programs that we funded in the past were that people were recruited for these programs, they went through the training, and then when it got time for the interview with an employer, the employer did not think they were the right culture fit. There was just some gaps outside of the technical skills. So we're really focused on making sure individuals are getting assessed upfront for not only can they handle the technical skills, but can they handle working in a workplace, fitting into a work culture, those type of things. And we're going to share a lot more. There's a lot more detail in the actual website that we're launching, hopefully, fingers crossed, next week. But just know that that's another feature as well. And there'll be more details provided on the website. In addition to that, we're looking for kind of a full array of supportive services to be provided to learners. And this is just, something that I would encourage all of you to include in budgets. But one of the most important features of the programs that we saw that we funded were access to childcare, access to transportation, access to mental health services, issuing whether it's a stipend to access those services, specific supports aligned to those services. Those were really critical features to make sure that individuals were completing the program and not dropping out halfway because of circumstances not related to their ability to complete a training program. So this is a really critical feature, and we will be looking for that to be included in applications. In terms of the training opportunities, we're not taking any particular slant on whether it's fully remote, a hybrid model, or in person. I think we're leaving that up to the discretion of the applicant. I think more broadly, we want to just make sure that the trainings are accessible. So, whether that skews towards the remote side, that's great. But we also understand that healthcare, for example, there's things that you can't do remote for a training, and there needs to be some in-person for that. So we're cognizant of the challenges around that. So just know we're not really going to be delineating a lot in terms of priority if we see one that's in person versus remote. What we will be focused on is collaboration, though. And this is kind of a key feature that's going to be scored, and we'll get more into the scoring criteria later. But the kind of larger vision of this program is to build systems in addition to getting people back to work. And one of the things that, you know, the Governor's Workforce Council and our office is very focused on is bringing people together in regions that previously haven't worked together in the past. So we are really focused on connecting institutes of higher education with nonprofits in their region, regional workforce development boards in their region, other entities in the workforce space that can really help augment the work that you all are doing. You know, some of these nonprofits, I was just on the phone with New Haven Works yesterday morning as one example. They are deeply embedded in their communities. And when we think about some of the challenges that folks face in terms of recruitment, you know, in nonprofits that are kind of on the front lines are tremendous intake channels for getting folks on the ground into these programs who really need the services. So we will be really focused on seeing, is this program part of a larger system? Are you engaging your partners in your region in advance of applying? And we're definitely not just leaving you to identify all these people on your own. We have a technical assistance team that is going to be led by Kelly, and Laura and Isabel are also going to be serving on that team. But our goal is to help connect you with those individuals and those organizations. So we are by no means leaving you on your own for that. And again, we'll get more into technical assistance and what that means, but really, really, really focused on collaboration here and making sure that you all are working with employers, for example, as another entity. We are really going to be looking for letters of support, or preferably even letters of commitment for employers that would be hiring or that have committed to hire folks who have graduated from these programs. So again, that's another example of things that we'd like to see on the front end in terms of collaboration. And then just the last thing I'll mention on this slide is the other two areas of the pie chart that you see. ARPA is our first deployment, this initial 70 million, but we are working diligently on a plan for our bonding authorization. Our office received $40 million in state bonding. We are working on a plan for how that money is going to be spent. We do not have the money yet. We're hopeful that there is a bonding commission meeting next week and that we will receive a portion of those funds. But again, nothing is set in stone yet. But just know we will likely be engaging all of you on a separate conversation as we roll out the $40 million, because there will be a slightly different focus on those with those funds than what we're focused on here with the 70 million in ARPA. And then, you know, there's other pools of funding that we're working on identifying. Isabel will be talking more about our Good Jobs Challenge application. That is a significant opportunity, I think, for institutes of higher ed to receive funding to roll out programs that, again, are aligned on getting people back to work. There's a lot of similarities between Good Jobs Challenge and CareerConnect, but slight nuances that we'll discuss later on. But I think hopefully that helps provide folks with an overview on what our focus areas are for this initial deployment, which is the ARPA funds. Next slide. And if anyone has questions, we can monitor the chat, or feel free to just jump right in and interrupt me.
I have a question. This is Manohar Singh. I'm the Dean of Graduate School at Central. If this is the right moment, I'll be happy to have a very specific question.
Go for it.
One is that we have certificates that are for credit, and then we have certificates that are not for credit at the graduate level. So I'm wondering if, for example, I have certificates that are ready to roll and they are under BOR consideration, or they are within our purview to just implement. Um, what kind of support am I expecting? Will these dollars be able to fund the students and pay their tuition, or will it be only used for the university expenses to develop these programs and students will still have to pay their fee? I mean, can these dollars be used to say, hey,
Yep.
Tom Smith is coming to the program, he can't afford it, but this funding from the state will come in and the university will get its revenue by offering this to someone who can't fund, but the state funding will support that tuition. How is that model?
Yep, good question. So we will touch on that later in the presentation under eligible uses of the money, but the short answer is the main use is for student tuition, but there is a broader use that you can do if there needs to be some program development or some ancillary things that need to be considered. You know, we will factor that into the decision, but know that we'll get into more of the details on what these funds can be used for, but there's a lot that rolls into that, but student tuition, absolutely, and program development, it'll depend, basically, is the short answer on that.
Beautiful, thank you.
Kyle, I just want to point out that there's one question in the chat as well from Michael Serbolino. He asked, are these funds limited to workers in a job force, or can it be used for education and training for post-secondary institutions?
So I'm gonna try to interpret that question when we say job force, people who are in the labor force right now versus folks who are enrolled at a post-secondary institution. So these funds, and if I'm misinterpreting that, please let me know, but these funds cannot, and this is kind of tied to this slide, so good timing, but these funds cannot be used for individuals who are currently employed. You know, there's kind of two main populations for this fund. One is the unemployed, people who lost their job because of the pandemic or who were unemployed before the pandemic. But there's also this other category, which are individuals who have been negatively impacted by the pandemic. That is the kind of broader federal guidance that we are operating under, which we know is painfully vague, and we are in the works of interpreting it ourselves. But we think that a narrative can be crafted where you know, a lot of people have been impacted by the pandemic, almost everyone in some sense. So if you can thread the needle in your application of showing that the participants of your program have been impacted by the pandemic, that will be scored, you know, accordingly as we're reviewing applications. But I will say the lion's share of the money is going to go towards those who are unemployed. Or underemployed, I would say.
My question, just to reiterate, I wanted to know if the funds could be used for a post-secondary institution for tuition, or is this for job recreation? And I think you answered part of it with the last question. So are these tuition dollars available to my students that are currently enrolled, or new students coming in?
So I think definitely available to students who are coming in. This is a means of definitely recruiting new students.
Okay.
I think in terms of students who are currently enrolled in a program, that is not the traditional way that we would roll out these funds. I think the goal of these funds is to go towards individuals who are not in a program right now and getting them into a program. I think we would need to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, because again, for instance, we would prioritize someone who's not in a program over someone who is already in a program. The goal here is to get people engaged into an educational program and into the system, so to speak. So if someone is already in a program and, for instance, you know, they are having financial hardship and maybe can't complete the program, we can maybe consider that on a case-by-case basis. But the main goal here is to use this to encourage people to enter into a program and not necessarily support someone who is already in a program.
So January 4th, I've got 5 new students coming in. They've signed contracts and put down their deposits. So they would not be eligible because they already have a signed contract?
I'm not going to say they're not eligible, but again, the focus here is getting people into a program. It's not necessarily the case that they would be ineligible, but when in terms of us scoring an application, we are going to be looking at people who are not currently enrolled in a program and are kind of floating in the ether.
Got a lot of those. Got a lot of those.
But I will say, and I know, Elena, you have your hand up. Just the last piece, Michael, that I would add is we can evaluate those things on a case-by-case basis. And I think this is where our technical assistance team can be very helpful in terms of let's look at those 5 students, for example, and kind of evaluate what their hardships have been. Have they been impacted by the pandemic? Do they check off some of those boxes to know if we can serve them? Again, the goal is to not be exclusionary here. We're working within the confines of the guidance that's been released by Treasury on these ARPA funds, but we want to make sure these are going to the right people at the end of the day. So we'll work with teams and institutions on a case-by-case basis based on these those specific type of questions.
And applications will be available.
I will get to that in a subsequent slide.
Sorry about it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Elena, I see you have your hand up also.
Hi, thank you. I'll be very quick. Is there a database that we can be resourcing of the population right now that has been affected from COVID?
So there is not a database that broad who's kind of been affected by COVID, but there are several databases that we are developing that will be available for institutions for these grants. So one, for example, is we work closely with our Department of Labor. They have a lot on their plate, and we, but they have access to the unemployment distribution list. I think we need to be very careful about how that's accessible and to whom, but that is a potential avenue that would need to go through our office, and we would need to work with DOL because they are underwater in terms of claims still. So that is an option, but that will need to be really discussed with DOL at the end of the day on whether that's allowable. The other option is the portal that I mentioned in the beginning. This really is the kind of the net that we're casting to get people into one system where people can use that for recruiting down the line. Because we know recruitment is very fragmented right now in Connecticut. People do their own thing. The goal is really to use that portal to ensure that there's one place that people can go to source candidates for their programs. Now, not all the time will those individuals necessarily be impacted by COVID, but that will be a really good database for you to understand, you're running a, healthcare certificate program. You can easily filter in that portal on individuals who are in your region, who are interested in healthcare, who are unemployed. It's really a way to better identify those folks and use that portal to streamline your recruitment process.
Thank you.
I see Dorothy, you have your actual hand up, which I appreciate, not the emoji.
How you doing? Actually, I had a question. I have a cosmetology school, and I have a lot of students, people in my area want to come to my school. But I was wondering, because there's so many people looking for jobs in my area, and my students cannot afford to come at all. So I can't even train anybody because there's no money, but there is a lot of jobs available. People in all the places where I'm are looking for work. I have people calling me all the time looking for hairdressers. And it seems like there's nobody can afford to come. I have a couple of students of my own that have not come because of COVID, but the hours it goes by hours. It's 1,500 hours. Is that something that would be accessible for these? I know you're looking for smaller times. I mean, could you change maybe the hours? We could reduce the hours of cosmetology instead of 1,500, maybe make it 1,000 or a little less.
So just 2 comments on that, and then I want to get back to the slides because I think a lot of these questions will be covered in subsequent slides. But I think just 2 comments to that. One is we are focused on certain industries here, but we have carved out a kind of other bucket because we know there's going to be these type of programs where they might not fall cleanly into the industries as we define them. But at the end of the day, if there are jobs waiting for these folks, that is what we care about the most. So we'll evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, but just know that there will be funding available for other programs. So know that like for cosmetology, for example, there will be funding available for those programs. To your question on kind of changing a program to fit the needs, there's no hard and fast requirement in terms of program duration. We encourage applicants to consider shorter term programs because of the fact that this goal is to get people back to work. But if you know you have 1,500 hours as a minimum requirement, I wouldn't necessarily think about changing that if you think that's going to impact the outcomes and the quality of the program. So just know there's flexibility. We're just encouraging shorter term programs. Now, are we using these funds to support like 4-year degrees? Probably not. That's more expensive. Believe me, our office is working on additional strategies to cover that route, but through these funding, we are encouraging kind of shorter term programs.
Oh, that's perfect. Perfect. That will work really well. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so just going back to the slide quickly, I think we talked about the focus here. This is again on people who have been impacted by the pandemic or who have been unemployed or because of the pandemic or before the pandemic. By the way, we will share these slides out with folks, so don't worry about missing something because I'm going too fast. I know we have a lot to cover. So in terms of award amounts, this is a kind of a critical point that I want to emphasize. So there's 2 award amounts. One amount is for regional applications. These we've capped at about $3 million and about 3 years. You can submit multi-year grants here, but what we're trying to encourage are statewide applications. So we've upped the ante if you are working across multiple regions of the state. In this case, actually all 5 of the kind of WIOA designated regions, and we'll share how we're defining those, but it's basically Hartford region, New Haven region, the Northwest, the East, and then kind of Southwest, the tail of Connecticut. If you're working across those 5 regions, you're eligible for much more money. In this case, up to $18 million over 4 years. So again, if you're seeing a school, if you're a school in a certain region, you have a program that is training the same people as a school in a different region, talk to each other and collaborate on an application because you'll be eligible for much more money than if you were to just submit an application on your own. Obviously, we know there are individual regional variations where there's going to be one profession that's super specific to a region in Connecticut. That's why we're still making these regional grants available up to $3 million. We do not want in any way for these funds to not be allowed to support specific regional needs. But again, where there's duplicative needs across the state, we want folks to collaborate on getting those applications, working with those institutions on the front end so that ultimately you guys can get more money and develop those partnerships. Next slide. I'm gonna hold questions for the end because I just want to make sure I get through all of this stuff so you guys can get the full picture here. So this is kind of the breakdown that we have when I mentioned to Dorothy before on some of the regions, or excuse me, some of the industries. So these are estimates. Let me be very clear. These are high level estimates. We are not going to hold ourselves to the dollar, to the cent on these figures, but as you can see, we've kind of prioritized 4 key industries with these funds: manufacturing, IT, healthcare, and a broader sort of infrastructure and clean energy bucket, given a lot of the momentum we're seeing and additional funding that we're seeing potentially coming down from the Biden administration. We want to make sure that we are building a clean energy infrastructure here in Connecticut, that we're ready for some of the potential projects that are coming down the pike. Then we also have this 5th bucket of all other. So there is no really restrictions on this all other. Again, it's really dependent on the need of the region. Is there a demand and is there a job waiting for the person if they complete this? And is there kind of a career pathway for that individual beyond this one job that they might get from this training program? That's kind of a critical feature that we're going to align on, or that we're going to be looking at if we're considering kind of the all other category. I should mention, again, I think I briefly touched on this, but probably not to the extent needed. These funds will be available will be expensed by our office through 2024. And then institutions will have up until 2026 to spend the money. So we've capped our grants at 4 years. That's the maximum that you could apply for if you're doing a statewide grant. If you're doing a regional grant, you could go up to 3 years. So, but just know multi-year grants are encouraged. And how we would be evaluating those multi-year grants is based on annual outcomes. So based on outcomes that you will set, but our office will work with you on to define. If you hit those outcomes targets, you'll get your year 2 funding, and so on and so forth. So you would not get the full pool of funding right away. We are trying to emphasize and encourage quality and outcomes of these programs before subsequent years of money are released. So I'll talk more about that later, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear and that you all were aware of that.
Thank you.
The second piece here on intent, I mentioned this before, but we're really focused on these underrepresented populations. Those are just kind of the 5 examples that I mentioned before. But again, that's not an exhaustive list. And we will be sharing most likely a more specific definition on underrepresented populations. But just know when these 5 are ones that we will be particularly looking at. Next slide. Okay, so this kind of gets to one of the questions we got before, but there's 2 kind of key pieces here. I know that there's a lot on the slide, but so eligibility, there are 3 eligible applicants for these grants: institutions of higher education, or a consortia of institution or consortium of institutions of higher ed, community-based organizations or nonprofit organizations, and our regional workforce development boards. Those are the eligible applicants to apply. And then there are additional collaborators that we want to see included in the application. So this is where I was getting at: employers, K-12 school systems, municipalities, local governments, state agencies even. We want to see those folks included in the application and engaged. So again, an employer is a really good example. If you all are institutions of higher education, you are eligible to apply for these funds. We would love to see employers that have offered letters of support, letters of commitment, showed that you guys have engaged those individuals and those companies up front and said, this is our program. Are you hiring? Will you make commitments? Now, again, we're not saying if you don't have employers committed, we're not going to fund the program. That's not at all what we're trying to do here, but we are really trying to encourage that to happen. So that is being scored accordingly as part of our application criteria. We talked about the collaboration piece. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I mean, we want people to collaborate and we want people to work together before submitting an application. The last piece here that I would mention is around recruitment. Again, we're leaving recruitment up to the institutions themselves. We are respective of institutional recruitment processes that are taking place. However, we are encouraging that you all leverage the portal that is being built, that will be marketed sometime early next year. Again, we're in the midst of developing that, but we highly encourage institutions to leverage that portal to make sure that there's additional folks being considered for their programs. And then I think more broadly, awardees will be required to submit quarterly performance reports to our office. We're trying to take a very data-focused view here and get kind of outcomes reports, which we'll be defining on our website what are the actual data fields that we're going to be requesting. But we're trying to minimize as much as possible the reporting burden, but also trying to get as much data on these programs in real time as possible. So we will be asking for quarterly reports. And I think more broadly, we're doing a lot of work with our regional workforce development boards. They are kind of a critical engine for our workforce development system. We are highly encouraging that institutions are working with their regional board, not only because they offer, I think, critical services, tapping into the unemployed populations, identifying individuals in the communities who are eligible for job training, running pre-assessments and case management services for learners, even having their own placement support services. So they offer a lot of services, and we want to make sure there's not duplication if those services are already being offered in those regions. We highly encourage institutions to work with their boards, because our office has seen what the boards can do and how effective of partners they can be. So we just highly encourage folks to reach out to the board in their region. And if you've never worked with your board, talk to us and we will get you plugged in right away. We work with those folks every week, so we can get you plugged into those organizations. In terms of allowable uses, I focus on the left-hand side. Everything on the right-hand side is basically not allowable, but on the left-hand side, the biggest piece is cost to training. So tuition support, as I mentioned earlier, cost for instructors, any supportive services are included as an eligible use here. So childcare, transportation, housing, mental health assistance, all of those are eligible expenses. Equipment to run the training programs is an allowable use. So if there needs to be new equipment procured, or equipment that you currently have is old and needs to be replaced, use these funds to upgrade and enhance those those equipment pieces. Lastly, to the question I got earlier, program and curriculum development is an allowable use. We will need to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, because we've seen some instances where those costs are high, and we're trying to minimize and be very frugal as much as we can with these dollars, given that these are one-time funds. But if there is a new program that can be stood up that's not currently in existence, that there is an employer demand for, there's been, employer commitments made, and, all the other things that we've talked about are kind of the boxes are being checked, then these funds can be supported to develop those new programs. But again, we will be looking at how expensive those upfront costs are. Are there other funds that you all can braid in addition to these funds? That's a big piece of this as well. One of our scoring criteria is looking at entities or applicants that have additional funding available to them. So we really want to make sure that matching funds are being used, or additional funds are being braided into this. Some things that are not allowable, building a building might be a little bit of a tough expense to justify here, like raw capital CapEx is typically not an eligible expense for this. Obviously equipment, if it's, surgical tools for a healthcare program or a piece of machinery for a manufacturing program, we feel those are a bit more in line. But if we're talking about building a whole new facility, that's likely where we would draw a line. Research or broader kind of process or system redesign activities, those are not really allowable uses here. We would need to really evaluate why that's necessary and how that's actually contributing to the development of the program in this case. Building a technology system like a database or implementing, a new technology is not allowable. We're trying to keep that separate here. And then, all of the other things you see on the right-hand side, fundraising, donations, those type of things are not allowable as per the ARPA statute. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the timing and the technical assistance that I keep mentioning. So there are going to be 2 teams offered by our office, one of which is our technical assistance team. This will be, as I mentioned, led by Kelly, and then Laura and Isabel will be on that team as well. The goal of this team is to provide ad hoc support to institutions or applicants as they're filling out their applications. So if you need to get connected to someone else in your region, if you have questions on allowable uses, or as you're building out your application, if you have questions, that team is kind of at your disposal, and use them to help answer questions or make connections to individuals as you're working through your applications. So they will have office hours every week. There will be links on the website for you to sign up for office hours support. We highly encourage you use those, so we don't have to manage a million different emails coming in. We are a 4-person team. We have a lot going on in our office. So I highly stress that to minimize the work of our technical assistance team, and so that they can clearly slot in a time to support folks. The other team is our review team. That will be led by myself, who will actually be reviewing and scoring the applications. We will have a variety of stakeholders reviewing the applications, and we will be ensuring that there is an equity lens applied to the review. We will actually have a member from our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee stand in on the review of each application. So we will make sure that those folks are included as we're reviewing the applications.
I'm just going to go back to Bye and say, look.
Can I just ask everyone to go on mute if you are not on mute? Then in terms of timing, the first applications will be due in February. And the application portal is going to, again, fingers crossed, launch next week. So you'll basically have about 2 months to work on applications. If you cannot fit or submit an application by February, there will be another window in August. These are both the 3rd weeks of the months, by the way. There will be another window in August that you can apply for, but just know that those windows will arise based on whether there is existing funding still available. So we have a feeling $62 million is going to go very quickly. So do I anticipate funding being left over for the August window? Yes. We will continue to evaluate whether additional cycles are necessary. So point being, we highly encourage folks to focus on that February timeline. And we know 2 months is going to go by quickly, and there's a lot that goes into this application. But again, that's where our technical assistance team can help. And we by no means want to just leave you high and dry and on your own as you're crafting these applications. So we're really trying to make sure we offer support so you guys can meet those deadlines. In terms of decisions being made, we will have, as soon as those applications are submitted in February, our team will immediately start reviewing and releasing decisions in March. And then we will start issuing letters of intent in April or late March, depending on the timeline, so that individuals can, or entities can start actually moving forward on their expenses. Because as I'm sure most of you know, state contracting is quite a bear, and we want to make sure that you all have at least a letter of intent to start expending your funds. So you'll see on this timeline slide, after the review period, our goal is to get those LOIs out as quickly as possible so folks can start recruiting and putting people, into your programs. So one additional piece that I want to mention on this slide is marketing. What we are going to, there's kind of 2 facets of marketing that I want to outline. One is marketing that individual institutions are going to do for their programs. That's absolutely an allowable expense, and you should embed that into your program and as part of your budget, which we'll be sharing a budget template. So just know that will be defined. But our office is going to work on a broader kind of statewide recruitment effort. And this is really to get people into that portal that I was talking about earlier. So what we're going to do is, hire a marketing firm and really use that opportunity to go into communities for individuals that, are unemployed, are underemployed, have been impacted by the pandemic, and get them to fill out these forms, that intake form that I was mentioning earlier, so that their name is in the proverbial hat, so that they can be considered for future programs. Again, this is really a way that we're encouraging individuals and institutions to leverage this portal to help their recruitment effort, but know that we will be running marketing basically from January on to get people continuously into that portal, so programs can actually use that effectively to get people into their programs. So we will be running a concurrent marketing campaign that's not focused on specific programs, because that's what you all are going to do as part of your applications, but more focused on actual future participants of those programs.
I have a question on marketing efforts. This is Manpreet. I work in the continuing education program at Southern Connecticut State University. So you said that you will be doing a broader marketing and we will be doing marketing based on programs, right? But you also said that this funding will be divided in regions. So will the institutions that get approved or get the funding, will they be listed when you start marketing? Because the marketing will start in January, but after March, when it's approved or whoever gets the funding, will they be listed by region or by statewide? Anyone can register anywhere. How will the marketing be done for the individual institutions?
Yep. So when I say the statewide marketing, we are not going to be marketing specific programs. So all we're going to be doing is marketing CareerConnect and saying, we are kicking off this program. There will be job training programs available to you as a resident. Please input your information into this portal. Again, this is like demographic information, career interest information, et cetera. That will then be used by applicants and programs to recruit for. So we wouldn't be saying, we wouldn't be marketing Southern, for example, in our marketing. We would just be marketing the general program, CareerConnect, to get people into the system so that providers can actually use those people in recruitment services. So when you're talking about specific institutional marketing for Southern in a region, for example, that would be included as part of the budget that you would submit for your application. So we wouldn't be recruiting for specific institutions in specific regions. We would be doing a statewide pull from our office, or statewide push from our office. We would rely on, you, Manpreet, in Southern to submit your marketing budget to us as part of your application.
Got it. So, but what we will have, so when people log into your portal, we will have access to that information so that we can do targeted marketing for those individuals.
Correct.
Okay,
exactly.
That helps. Thank you.
Yep. No, good question.
Thank you.
I'm cognizant of time. I'm not going to touch on the state bonding stuff right now in extensive detail. I'm going to quickly go through this list, but I realize we're running short on time. I know we have a little bit after the hour. We have about 15 minutes, but just know that this bonding is kind of our phase 2 of CareerConnect, and the bullets that you see here will be priority areas, supporting our regional sector partnerships, incentivizing basic skills training. There will be what we're calling an evergreen fund or a pay it forward fund. We're going to be using some portion of the bonding dollars to pay for tuition, just like we would with this ARPA money, but we would be asking those students to pay back the funds that would be reinvested into this fund on a continual basis. So this is a way that we can help stretch the dollars farther. We are very cognizant that we don't want to put an undue burden on students who have a financial hardship. So there will be a specific focus for who will be the target here. These will not be unemployed individuals, for example. The last thing we want to do is say, you're unemployed, here's some tuition, but you have to pay it back. For instance, what we would focus on is someone who is underemployed. They have a job, they have an income, but it's a lower income than they anticipate, or it's a job that doesn't really have upward mobility. We would like to fund their tuition to get into a program and then ask them to pay back the tuition over time. That would get reinvested in the fund that would go out to future participants. So this is a really exciting program. We're working with philanthropy and other organizations to match the funding so we can really create a fund in perpetuity. So just know this is something that we're working on. We will definitely reach out to higher ed institutions once we have this more fully baked. But this is kind of a really exciting opportunity in our opinion. So just a couple other things, alternative transportation solutions. We're going to be working on a kind of transportation fund. This is a mini fund. We don't have a lot, 40 million will go very quickly, but we want to make sure that we're encouraging and providing additional transportation supports for individuals to access job training program. Incumbent worker training is going to be a focus of these funds. Individuals who are currently employed are likely not a recipient of the ARPA funds that I just mentioned. So we want to make sure we are investing in our workers, investing in people who currently have employment, who might be underemployed, might be looking for a new job, might need additional skills to move up in their careers. We want to make sure there's a fund available for those folks. And then finally, we are going to have funding to support our DEI committee. This is a new committee on the Governor's Workforce Council. There will be dedicated funding to support those initiatives. And then SNAP ENT providers, we really want to encourage providing support to them through this bond money, because any investment in a SNAP ENT registered training provider elicits a 50% reimbursement from the feds. So for any ENT registered provider, we would want to use a portion of the bond funds to go to them so we can get a federal reimbursement that we can reinvest in our workers. So again, these funds are a bit more flexible, trying to be a bit more innovative, try to recognize some additional pools of funding, whether it's matching funds or something like that, to stretch these one-time investments farther. And we will come out with more details on these funds later on. Just know right now the focus is getting this ARPA money out on what we talked about before. Okay, I think there's one more slide after this, so let's hop to that, and then I'll pause for questions, as I'm sure other folks have additional questions. But this is basically a snapshot of how we're going to be scoring applications. So this is, I think, a really important slide. This will be posted online. You will know exactly what our criteria are that we are going to be evaluating proposals on. You will know how we're scoring, what weight we've assigned to each of these. We can't post that right now for obvious reasons, but once this is shared on our website, you will see all of these scoring criteria and the weights assigned to it. We're trying to make this a very transparent process. What I'm going to do is just focus on the first three right now. These are arguably the most important for us to share with you all, but again, this is sort of a reiteration of what I said previously, but we want to focus on people impacted by the pandemic or people who are unemployed. We want to focus on individuals from historically underrepresented populations. We want to make sure people are collaborating on the front end to submit statewide proposals. And we want to make sure these proposals are aligned to a current industry demand. So there's a lot of other things on here. I'm not going to get into the details right now because we still have a lot of non-CareerConnect things to cover. But just know we will, I see a couple questions in the chat. We will be sharing these slides out. We will make sure that these are posted on our website as soon as that launches. Last slide, and then I see there's a bunch of questions in the chat that I have totally ignored. So we'll make sure we will get to those. Just finally on contact information, we've developed an email address for this. Please write this down. Again, we'll share these slides, but this will be kind of the one-stop email for this program. And we want to make sure that everyone has this so they know who to reach out to in terms of receiving technical assistance or support on the actual application as you all are working through that. And again, just to reiterate our application portal, our goal is to launch that next week. There will be a large announcement that we'll share through our Governor's Workforce Council distribution list, but we will also share that with the folks on this call and the other socialization calls that we've had, because we know not everyone is on that distribution list. So we'll make sure everyone on this call knows as soon as that portal has been launched. And with that, I will pause briefly for questions, and then I want to get into some of the other initiatives that we're working on. And 15 minutes is, excuse me, not nearly enough time, but we will do our best to try to answer as many questions as possible and then get into some of our other topics. Why don't I try to tackle some of the questions in the chat that I see, but our team can take these down and make sure we're following up just so we have enough time. But why don't I try to get one at least? I see Jen has a question. Can we use funds to market opportunities and provide scholarships to complete an in-demand BA to students who maybe have associates and stopped? Is there a cap on how long the program may be? So the short answer is yes, the funds can be used to provide scholarships for folks who are in bachelor's programs. I think that is not how we are prioritizing these funds, I will say. When we're scoring applications, we are looking for programs that are more aligned to shorter term certificates that get people back to work quickly. But that is by no means exclusionary. Just know that that is our focus for these funds. So there's no cap on how long a program can be outside of the ARPA regulated timeline. So again, we have to get our money out by 2024, and then you all have to spend that by 2026. So 2026 is the last year that you all can spend money here. So take that into consideration as we're working through that.
Now, I just want to add one thing to that, that one of our criteria will also be that we want the average cost per participant, though, to be under $10,000 so that we can help as many people as possible, which might not lend itself to longer term programs as well.
Dorothy, I see you have your hand up. Go for it. Oh, you're on mute, Dorothy.
Okay, I have a question. I have a smaller cosmetology school and I have a lot of students that want to come, they can't afford. Would the funds be available to make it like a little bit bigger school in the area that I'm in? I'm by the Norwich area and I have a lot of kids that want to come and there's a lot of jobs available there. It just, my school may not hold as many that might want to come. Would they, if I own the building that I'm in, would I be able to just go into a little location in the same area and just make it bigger?
Yeah, I mean, these funds can definitely be used to expand the size of existing programs.
Yeah, no.
By no means are we saying you have to operate within the bounds of your existing, class sizes here. Like this, the goal is if there's a need for students that's not being met currently, we want to make these funds available to expand existing programs. So that's definitely an allowable use and something that we would encourage based on the demand that we're seeing. Again, if you're saying you want to build a whole new facility, that's where we draw the line, but it definitely expansion eligible.
I would just like put a rent place.
Yep.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. I'm going to make sure that we capture all of the other questions in the chat so that we can follow up. Maybe Jen will go through you to disseminate the answers. I want to make sure all of these are answered, but I am cognizant of time. So let's jump in. I know the two other agenda items that we had for you, these are not related to CareerConnect anymore, but we wanted to provide a very quick update on the work that we're doing on the regional sector partnerships. And then we also wanted to update everyone on the Good Jobs Challenge grant that OWS is applying for. So I'm going to turn it over to my team to pull up those slides and provide a brief update on those. But again, just want to say thank you all for the time on CareerConnect and happy to answer any more questions on that and excited to work with you all on this, but I'll turn it over to my team to talk about some of the other updates we have.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Real quick, my tech skills are limited, so I kind of want to break this presentation up into 2 recordings. So I'm going to briefly stop recording and then attempt to restart recording. So if you could just bear with me for a second.